Hey folks, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be doing some DIY plastic repair on our old 1976 city car. And everything I show here are the same techniques that you would be using if you were repairing broken plastic parts on your car, such as bumpers, dashboards, etc. This car came to us in pretty good shape, but it's got some repair issues here. The body is made out of ABS plastic, so we're going to have to repair some of these cracks. I've got some large cracks here. And coming across here, I've got some smaller ones, some little spiderweb cracks. So we're going to show you the couple different ways that you can mend up these cracks. We're going to do some hot staples, and we're also going to do some plastic welding today. So check this out. Now for the larger cracks, we're going to be using this thing. This is a hot stapler, and it uses these staples. There's a couple different kinds. And the way it works, you put the staple in the end of that, it heats up and you actually embed it into the plastic, and it gives your plastic a little bit more structure. So we're going to start on those larger cracks by doing some reinforcement with the hot stapler. And once we're done with this, we're going to get in there with a plastic welder and weld up those seams and put some filler rod in there. So let's get started with this. Now when you're shopping around for a hot stapler, this part is very important. You can get a very cheap hot stapler and those things will just have one setting, but you don't want to be burning your plastic. You just want to be melting into it. So this one has a low, medium, and high setting. So I have it set to low, and that seems to work the best for my plastic. Now, if you are starting out and you haven't used your plastic before, if you have a test piece you can try it out on, great. If you don't, I would start at the lowest setting and work your way up. Now, ideally in a perfect world, you would want to close the gap and have this butted up right next to each other. Unfortunately, because this is a structural part of the car and I can't really remove it, we're going to have to be just dealing with the large crack. So we're going to be using these very wide staples, and these go in here and they actually bridge the gap and give it some structure. It'll also give me some material to bed the filler rod into once we start the welding process. Now the way the hot stapler works, you've got your device here, you got this little button, this applies power through these. These pretty much stay cold. Your staple is the part that's going to get hot. So we insert the staple into the little holes on either end of this thing. And as long as you're not holding down that button, you'll be fine. If you hold down that button, you're going to cook your fingers a little bit. So now with the staple loaded, pushing the button, that'll start heating up the staple. And like I said, I have it right now on the low setting. We're going to push it straight into the plastic. It'll start melting its way in. And as you get it in there, start working it around. You do want to mush the plastic in around it, and then release. Let it cool off a little bit, and then you can remove that, and now you've got the staple in place. Some of this plastic may still be a little bit warm, but it shouldn't be too hot. If it's too hot and you're burning it, you're doing something wrong. So now with all of our staples in place, we have the little pins coming out, and if you're not going for that mohawk look, you can take a pair of flush cut and get those out of there. Now the problem with this is if it's on the outside, especially if it's on the outside, these get it close to the surface, but not all the way down. So after this, we're going to get in here with a Dremel and bring it all the way down to the surface, so then we can start our next step. Also, something to note is when you're doing this, these things tend to shoot off at a zillion miles an hour. So make sure you're wearing eye protection so you don't catch one of these in the eye. It also goes without saying that since we are melting plastic, you want to do this in a well-ventilated area and possibly wear a respirator if you can. Now, if you went online and bought one of those cheap $17 plastic welders, do yourself a favor, return it. You want to use something more like this. I'm actually using a soldering iron, and the reason I'm using it is because I can vary the temperature. If you use one of those little things, is basically a soldering iron set on high. You're not going to melt your plastic, you're going to burn it. You don't want to burn your plastic, you want to melt it. You're basically melting the crack back together. So what I did here, I've got my soldering iron set, and you want to play around with your settings on it to get it to the point where it melts the plastic, but doesn't burn it. And then you want to get kind of the widest, broadest tip you can find, and do that. Or if you can get a welder with a variable, controller on it, you can do that too, but this fits two bills. Once you're done with this and you got solder stuff you got to do, you got a solid soldering station as well. I do have a link for some of these down below if you want to check it out. I've also got a link for the stapler that I've got down below if you want to check that stuff out. But right now, let's get into melting this plastic back together. Now, another handy thing to have is some sort of a wire brush. You want to brush any plastic debris and stuff off your tip every now and then to keep it nice and clean. Now what I'm going to do to start with is, I don't know if you can see up here, but I have a couple small cracks, and you want to stop that crack from spreading. So what I'm going to first do is take my soldering iron and I'm going to melt down into my plastic really far. We're going to go right across that crack, and as I do it, I'm going to then fold the plastic back over it, push down again, fold the plastic back over it, push down again. We want to melt that crack and then seal the crack back up with more plastic so it doesn't spread. So there, now we've stopped that crack from spreading. Now you can even come in here with your wire brush and wire brush any of the extra debris off. Now from there, we're going to work our way all the way down the crack, but the big thing is this area, the area that we're going to have to fill. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how we're going to fill the large area. Now before we start filling the area, we want to start trying to actually connect the crack together. We're not just filling it, we actually have to mend the damage. We're going to get in there with our soldering iron. This is pretty thick plastic, so we're going to have to get pretty far down into that crack to really start filling in the damage. And also remember, you've got metal staples in there as well. So you're going to want to push the plastic in all around those metal staples, because that'll help add to some of the structural integrity of your patch here. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm really digging in and pushing the plastic around. It's much more difficult on these larger cracks to really fill them and make them structural. But in the case of this thing, this car is going to be moving around a lot. We want these not just to be cosmetic, but we want them to be structural repairs. And in this little corner right here, we were actually missing a piece of plastic. So we're pushing plastic from the body of the car down into that hole. And the fact that we've got a hole there, and now we've got some shallow areas elsewhere, is not a problem, because we're going to be fixing that in just a second. So we've got it welded as best as we can with the plastic that is already on the body. Now it's going to look a little bit more like welding, because we're going to be using filler rod. Now you can buy filler rod online. This is some thicker stuff, but another thing you can use is zip ties. A lot of people use that. I like to use this. This is 3D print filament. It's ABS. The body here is ABS, so it's a good mix. So if you're doing ABS, this is a really cheap way to get a lot of filler rod. Now this looks pretty ugly, and it's also pretty deep. So what we're going to be doing is not just filling, but we're going to be pulling all of the plastic around in with this to give us a better bond, but also fill it out so it's a little bit more cosmetic. The other nice thing, if you're going into plastic that's been colored or dyed, this stuff has been painted, but you can get different colored filler rod, especially with the ABS stuff if you're using 3D print filament. I got white filament because I figured once this thing is painted, it'll disappear a little bit better if it's white versus black or some other color. So when I'm pushing this in, I'm pushing it in, but I'm pushing it into the plastic underneath to get a little bit more of a adhesion of bond. I'm melting some of the plastic underneath and melting this all together. That way this isn't just filling it, it's also providing some structure. Okay, so we've done some of the filling with the larger filler rod. Now I'm going to get into these smaller cracks with the filament that we were using from the 3D printers. And you see what's really nice about this stuff is if you're going in the smaller cracks and you're careful, you can get it in there without really getting a lot of slop out. And like I had mentioned before, since you can get this stuff in the same color as your plastic, if you're careful and you're just mending smaller cracks, you can also make this stuff cosmetic. So with that right there, with a little bit of sanding, that'll almost disappear into the white of the body. We are going to be repainting probably the whole body though once we're done with all the plastic mending in here. So I've gone through here and smoothed it out a little bit, and you can see it's not pretty, but that's not the point. It's structural, it'll hold. Now after this, I'm going to be doing some body filler over it. We're going to be doing some adhesion promoter, and eventually the entire body's probably going to have to get painted on this thing, and we're going to have to try to do something to recreate those decals. So I hope this video helped you out. I hope these tools give you some ideas for ways that you can repair your stuff at home. This isn't just for cars, but really any kind of plastic, cars, stuff around the house, plastic kayaks, all sorts of good stuff. So I hope this video helped you out. If it did, give it a great big thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos and content on this. I'm going to have it on 2 of my channels, so you're going to want to check out both of those links down below. And of course, thanks for watching.